Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mary Walter Radio. How are you? Glad to have everyone here. Welcome, James. James was not here last week. Glad you're here. Missed you. I have to say, I just looked up before we came on, and I just saw you sitting down, and it looked like you had no shirt on from the back. And I was like, why doesn't he have a shirt on? This is going to be a weird show. You just have a flesh colored shirt. If you are new to the podcast, please subscribe. Please also like the podcasts. You can go back if you're on YouTube, and you can go and view previous podcasts. Please do. We welcome that. And the audio will be up on Spotify and Apple about an hour or so after this podcast, assuming that I get everything moving in the right direction. We have an amazing guest tonight, one of my few favorite people from the swamp. And we met long before then. We met in New York in, I think it was 2011, in Fox News in the green room. And I had known his name. I had heard about him. And just a great guy. And I truly, truly enjoy him. And an amazing wife. And we just hit it off. And I'm so happy to be able to call him a friend. And he has a new book out. So in a couple minutes, we're going to talk to him coming up. If you don't know who it is, well, now you want to know. Just very quickly, I think we have sad news, right, James?
Yeah, I think we do. Sadly.
So Ringo is friends with Al, who was a loyal viewer of the podcast, and he was always cheerleading for us, and he was always, retweeting it, and he was always, pulling for us, and he was here every night, and he was always the first one in. And we can't find where Al is. Where Al disappeared, just disappeared. He got kicked off Twitter for God knows what, and he had like a lifetime ban. And so he was over on Truth Social. And I know that Ringo had sent him a note on Facebook. He didn't respond. I sent him a note on Truth Social probably about the third week in April. He never even read it. And so we've been asking, if anybody knows where he is, could you please tell him, we want to know if he's okay. And Ringo went on his Facebook page and she saw a post. What did the post say?
That we'll miss you. You'll always be a good brother. Seemingly that he has passed on.
Yeah. So it looks as if Shaman Al, apparently, according to that post, it was very touching. I couldn't see it because I'm not his friend and it was not public for whatever reason. But Tina could see it. And a very touching post by apparently a sibling. And so I think we lost him. We don't know what happened, though. No idea what happened. So,
yeah.
Do you hear that interference in the background?
We'll try to get the bottom of it.
I'm sorry?
I don't hear any.
I do.
I hear
Okay, I hear interference.
I hear the song.
Oh, is that what it is? Is that thing? No, I turned the song off.
Yeah, I hear the song in the background still.
Is it? Okay, maybe that's what it is. Okay, maybe that's it. No, I still hear that interference. Oh well. Okay. I think your tagline should be Mary Walter Radio. Awesome to the max. Oh, thanks, Sherry. We appreciate you. Okay, let's bring our guest in again. One of my favorite people. I am so excited to have him here. Cal Thomas is with us. Yay!
Hey, thank you, Mary. It's good to see you again. You never look better. As for you, James,
This is James. James is my work husband. James was my producer back in James, 2014 when we started the last show, 2013? Something like
that, yeah.
13, yeah.
Yeah, and so he's my work husband, and like I said, Cal is just one of the nicest people. I don't know how the hell you survived in the swamp, because nice people get destroyed there. So how you did it is beyond me. But a very sweet man.
Thank you, Mary. Very nice of you.
Of course.
You're the one who got me started on 6:35 in the morning for free on WMAL in Washington. So I don't know if I should thank you or wish I could sleep for an extra hour.
And you're still doing it.
Still doing it, yeah. I'm a habitual addict.
What I always told him, I'm like, you could do it in your pajamas. Nobody's gonna know.
What are they?
I'm sorry?
What are pajamas?
Oh,
Don't visualize that.
so Cal is a prolific writer. Just go to calthomas.com. You can read all of his editorials, his writings, his columns. They're all there. Also, Washington Times, and as you see there, and if you saw the promo for this podcast, his book was right there. A Watchman in the Night. And Cal, I cannot wait to read this book. Because first of all, I cannot believe you've been in journalism for 50 years. I mean, how is that? You're only in your 40s. So how did that happen?
It was a previous life I started in. Well, I started as a reporter. Actually, I started as a disc jockey in suburban Maryland radio station. My wife was working there. I was on the air. She was squiring celebrities around on the outside because she's far better looking than I am. And we went to high school together. It took me 50 years to win her over, but I finally managed. And then I worked for NBC News as a copy boy when I started age 19. And depending on your view of the media, worked my way up or down from there. Unlike a lot of other opinion writers, I had a career as a reporter first, which I think helps a lot in interpreting events and seeing how some things never change.
Now, this book is a compilation of all that time that you have spent and your observations on politics and life and America. And one thing that's great about Cal, and maybe I think one of the reasons that you have survived as long as you have in Washington, D.C., is you could disagree without being disagreeable, but you rarely take sides. And I think that that's a very hard thing to do, especially now in Washington, D.C. So what was the impetus behind the book? Why? What made you write it?
Well, as I entered the 40th year of my syndicated column, I went back and reviewed the things that I'd written since 1984, over 4,000 columns, if you can believe it. And I said, well, this would be a good time, I think. Not sure I'm going to make it to 50 years, but we'll see, as a columnist anyway. Good time to look back and see what's changed and what hasn't. The one thing that hasn't changed is human nature, especially with the politicians. You're hearing the same arguments now you've heard over and over again about the debt limit, about the poor, about racism. You look at Joe Biden's disgusting speech last Saturday at Howard University, a commencement speech. You would think it back in the 1920s with lynching and all kinds of unbelievable stuff. So I thought it would be a good idea. It's not a column collection, but just to go back and kind of do a diary or a roadmap on where we were in 1984 at the start of Reagan's second term, right up through the end of last year. Got some wonderful endorsements. You mentioned about surviving this town. I never hated anybody for their politics. If they hate me because of mine, that's their problem. But I've got pretty much run the political gamut from Henry Louis Gates Jr. at Harvard to Pat Sajak of Wheel of Fortune.
I love it. You see, Gregory here says, I've just added Watchmen to my Goodreads want to read.
Bless you, my son. Thank you very much.
Goodreads want to read
show.
Yeah. I cannot wait. Honestly, this is one of those books that I really do want to read. James, do you want to jump in? I'm sorry. I don't mean to monopolize this. I have so many questions.
But it's okay, because you just hit on something I was just telling something about. I watched a Reagan speech from around 84, and you're exactly right. They're literally talking about the same exact problems that are going on now. You think of that 40 years.
We have Russian interference there, James.
James, you're stopping and starting, and you're all kind of like frozen, and we can't understand you. Why don't you go out and come back in? All right.
Well, I think I got enough of his
okay.
comment on it, but Reagan signed that immigration bill, which now the Democrats tout as something good, but of course they didn't have a secure identifier on it, and so it wasn't all that effective. And now we're still arguing the same thing, but even worse conditions that we had in 1984 with an open border, thousands upon thousands of people pouring into this country illegally. You cannot sustain a nation unless you have secure borders. It's like having a cup of coffee and a glass of water, and you pour the water into the coffee and it dilutes the coffee. And if you pour it long enough, it replaces the coffee. Now, we are a nation of immigrants, of course, but those immigrants in the past mostly came legally and through a system that allowed them to be assimilated and embraced by the principles, the Constitution, the English language that built and sustained America. Unfortunately, right. Today, our motto has gone from e pluribus unum, out of many one, to out of one many. We're now hyphenated Americans. We're parts of tribes, gender groups, sexual behavior, and all of these other things. That's not what the founders had in mind. And that's not the strength that America displayed through wars and through the Great Depression.
I want to talk more about the book, but as we go through here, and I want to ask more about you as well. Like I have so many questions, but on the issue of immigration, since it's been brought up, Ronald Reagan, of course, made that deal with the Democrats that they would build the wall, we would stop, we're going to make this group legal, and of course that never happened. He never got his end of the bargain. But I want to know if it's different this time, Cal, because I'm watching the videos out of Chicago and out of New York where the populace is outraged. In Chicago, they were screaming and yelling because they're getting all of these, 250 to 500 illegals that are being bussed in, and they're keeping them in a school. Same thing in New York. They're going to be in a building that's 25 feet from a school. And the parents are like, well, I'm not sending my kid to school. These people we don't know what health problems they have. We don't know who these people are. They haven't been vetted. We don't know if they have criminal records. And I'm sitting back and I'm like, wow. People are shocked that they got the government they voted for. This is kind of fun. And I wonder if that actually resonates and takes hold and maybe kind of backfires on the Democrats, because they're dumping them in these neighborhoods with a lot of minorities. And these are the people that they count on to vote for them election after election after election. So is it different this time in that sense?
I wish it was, Mary, but you look at the newly installed mayor of Chicago, who in his inaugural address compared the death of a gangbanger to the death of a police officer who was resisting criminals and fought back. Mayor Adams is a product of the electorate. Alvin Bragg could be removed by Governor Kathy Hochul if she wanted, but she doesn't. And look at what he has done, Bragg, now with that Marine hero who stood in and protected women from the assault from a crazy homeless guy with a rap sheet longer than both of my arms. And now all of a sudden he's supposed to be the bad guy, and the guy with the rap sheet is supposed to be the good guy. So there are people who would vote for Satan if he had a D behind his name. And that's just crazy. It's the old definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Right, but here's the thing: the election in Chicago was before, I think, these people started to be put into schools in their neighborhoods. And I think when you start talking about people's kids, it's what we saw in Virginia, right? When you when parents started to realize, oh, that's Grace. Hi, this is Grace. Oh, say hello, Grace.
I'm a cat guy. I like cats. Do you know why dogs are Democrats and cats are Republicans?
Why?
Well, dogs, are totally dependent on humans. They even have to be taken outdoors to do their business. Cats could care less. They're totally independent.
Sherry says that's what's missing is assimilation. We don't even know what being an American means now. That's very true. But here's what, as I was saying, that like in Virginia with Glenn Youngkin, beating Terry McAuliffe, it was because of children. And people found out what their kids were learning in school, and they were outraged. They were outraged at the schools being closed. And I think it brought a lot of people together. It didn't matter whether you had a D or an R after your last name. Your concern for your children was your primary objective. That was your main concern. And I wonder if the same thing's happening now, because they're putting them in schools. Like the school in New York, they're like, our kids can't have graduation because it happens in the gym. All of the, the after school programs, basketball, all these things, none of that's going to happen this summer because they're putting these people in the gyms. And so I don't know. I think maybe, and I could be wrong, maybe they'll still, hold their nose and vote Democrat and sacrifice their children. I don't know.
Well, I think this is an issue that Republicans should have gotten on top of many years ago. I remember during the 2016 campaign, Donald Trump talked to an African-American Black audience, and he said, why do you continue to vote for these people? Your cities are a mess. Your schools are a mess. why do you keep voting for them? It was a great question. And yet
Yeah.
they do out of habit. And I just don't know why. I've been a proponent of school choice for many years. 37 states now have it. I think it's going to grow into pretty much 40, 45 states at least. It's amazing to me that the secular progressives on the left are all for abortion for any reason. They call it choice, but they're against choice for those children fortunate enough to have been born on where to go to school.
Yep.
I compare it to George Wallace, who stood in the schoolhouse door in the early 60s in Alabama trying to keep black children out. And now the secular progressive Democratic left is standing in the schoolhouse door of failing public schools trying to keep their kids trapped. You got somebody like Randy Weingarten, who is, I just learned today, has got this enormous pension. I don't think she ever taught a class. She's ruining the public schools if they weren't ruined enough. I think the public education is the last monopoly in this country, and it needs to be broken up. And one of the few side benefits of the pandemic was that so many parents found out what was being taught in their schools, most recently drag queen story time for kindergartners, and they were fed up. And a lot of them have moved to private schools and homeschooling, which has far more resources now than it ever has.
Yeah. A Watchman in the Night, the name of Cal's new book, and go to calthomas.com for all of his columns. And I know the book is available now, Amazon, bookstores, it's available everywhere. A Watchman in the Night, why that title?
I took it from an Old Testament verse. The ancient Israelites posted a watchman on the wall after they closed the gates at night to keep an eye out for invading armies and other bad guys who might do them harm. Not to think more highly of myself than I ought to, Mary, but I kind of see myself as a traditional values guy holding a lamp out, looking for the invading armies of the secular progressivism that is undermining and destroying this country, and reminding people through my columns and radio transcripts and TV appearances and wonderful little events like being on with you, that there are things that worked in the past. We are not the first generation to walk the earth. We didn't just climb out of a cave and have to invent the wheel or discover the use of fire. We have economic principles, moral principles, foreign policy principles that have been applied in the past, and some have worked and some have not. So why don't we go back and reclaim those things that worked, update them as necessary, and move forward instead of repeating the same mistakes over and over again? Look at this $31 trillion debt. No nation in history has ever been able to survive with that kind of debt. What makes the United States think that we're special, that we can avoid the same judgment of history that the others have experienced? It's just crazy. The same with uncontrolled immigration without assimilation, and the same of a loss of a shared sense of moral values. All of those things now are in place in the United States, and all of them were in place in the past for empires and superpowers that collapsed.
One of the things that you talk about, I know you're a very spiritual person, and thanks to Cal was kind enough to invite me to the National Prayer Breakfast for 2 years. 1 year I could go, and then I got smart and just started taking the day off so I could go. And one of the to me, it was amazing because I happened to be able to go the year that Steve Scalise spoke after he had been almost assassinated by Bernie Sanders, volunteer Democrat. And of course, President Trump was there. But the night before, Cal hosted something that to me is something I will always remember. And it was a media dinner. And I didn't know what to expect when I went to the media dinner. And I got to meet really great people at this event. And what it was very small in the sense of, like compared to the breakfast the next day. I actually got food at it, which was wonderful considering at the breakfast, I don't even think I got a cup of coffee because we were jammed in there like sardines and nobody could get anything. But it was so nice in this. It was what was said in the room stayed in the room. And Cal would invite incredible people, all very creative people from television, radio, movies, from Hollywood, names you would know. And I met the Duck Dynasty guys one time, which is amazing. And there would be different people who would speak through the dinner, and they talked about how God worked in their life and how they saw a faith in their life, but something affirming had happened in their life through the grace of God, and they knew that that's what it was. And the stories were all just so fascinating, and I just found them just really affirming in my life and in my faith, and that reassurance that God is still working. And
Well,
is
that's a great summation, Mary. I should hire you as my agent. That's very well done. Yeah, well,
we're gonna
there's
kick.
more. There's more to life than politics. There's more to life
Yeah.
than money. There's more to life than stuff. And what I try to do at those media dinners that you kindly mentioned, over 30 years, I was the host on them, is to bring successful and accomplished people in various walks of life, as you said, films, television, news, and the rest, producers, and have them tell their own personal stories about how they came to faith in Christ and what a difference He has made in their life. So I hope that had an impact on people in addition to yourself. It's very gratifying to me.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. And it didn't matter. There were people from Hollywood who are very far on the left. There were people, more conservative people like the Duck Dynasty guys and Mike Lindell from My Pillow. And we found out we had a mutual friend in Bob Beckel, which I didn't know. And Cal was kind enough to send me Bob's book, which is wonderful. And I appreciate that. But that was something. So let me ask you, how did faith, in your span of your career, do you think that faith, on one side, helped your career, but did it also ever hinder your career in any way? Both
Well,
sides.
it depends on what you mean by hinder. Of course, I didn't
Well,
get
that's
invited.
you. That's up to you.
I didn't get invited to many Washington social events, which is fine because most of them just talk about reading each other's stuff and reinforcement, and some of them drink too much and the rest. But I think it gave me a perspective that, to repeat myself, we're not the first people to walk the earth. And it helped me understand certain priorities. I mean, for the first half of my life, I wanted to be a network news correspondent, believing that the fame, the money, the notoriety would give me peace and a certain amount of pleasure. And then when I got fired in 1973, out of that came a commitment of my life, not to religion, but to a person named Jesus of Nazareth. And I went into kind of a spin for 11 years, moved back to Houston, Texas, where I'd come up from professionally. But many things happened during that period. And then in 1984, the door opened for me really miraculously to write this syndicated column. And I'm very proud of the man who wrote the introduction, Tom Johnson, who was then the publisher of the LA Times, later president of CNN, and who opened the door for me at the LA Times Syndicate, an old-fashioned Democrat, an LBJ Democrat who really believed in pluralism and diversity and all those other buzzwords that are thrown around today, but he really practiced it. And he wrote a beautiful introduction, and I'm, again, very proud of the number of people from different persuasions who gave me blurbs for this book. You know, again, you live in Washington, you have two choices. You can either surround yourself with people who just reinforce what you already believe, or you can reach out to other people and learn from them, and then you earn a right to be heard yourself. I would much rather do that.
So, what if you had to give me like the top? Just give me like the top two things that you think you've gleaned from looking at America, looking at Americans, kind of like from the watchtower, like and looking
Not the
down and
Watchtower,
watching.
that's for Jehovah's Witnesses, but go on, that's all right.
Yeah, yes, well, that's true. But sorry. But looking out on the American landscape and viewing it as you do from the 12-foot, view, and observing and writing it out and making the notes. When you look back on all of this, what do you think you've learned?
Well, first of all, there's some great verses in the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes. And one of my favorite is, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything you think has been thought before. Everything you do has been done before. So there are really no new ideas, technologically maybe, but there are only old ideas that either work or don't. So I try to go back and look at those things that work, update them as necessary, and move forward. I mentioned the economy a few minutes ago. We know, I mean, from John Kennedy, who cut taxes. He probably wouldn't get nominated for his party
Right.
today, much less elected. And Democrats back then believed in a strong military, anti-communism, and all of these other things that they seem to have abandoned in our day. And so we know what works. This is, I hate to use a cliche. I will never use this in my column. It's not rocket science. We don't have to go to a university and study these things. They're all there for us to see. So lower taxes mean more prosperity for individuals. Now, this administration and Bernie Sanders and the rest are always knocking millionaires and billionaires. Well, I got news for them. Poor people don't hire people. And when the rich people hire people, they pay taxes, they contribute to the economy. But this envy is really harming us. Last year during Medicare open season, I saw all these commercials for Medicare supplements, and there were 4 words that were in every single one of them that defines what our problem is today: free, entitlement, deserve, and benefit. Now think about this. There's nothing about your personal responsibility to stay healthy, eat right, don't smoke, don't drink to excess, exercise, all that. No. Free, deserve, entitlement, and benefit.
Yeah.
Now you work that into the psyche of the American people, then next comes envy. If you make $2 and I make 1, you owe me 50 cents to make it fair. That's not the way America was built. If you made the $2 and I made 1, I would come to you and say, how did you make the $2? I want to be like you. Tell me your work ethic. Where'd you go to school? What'd you study? We don't do that anymore. It's envy, greed, entitlement, and benefit. When I was growing up in suburban Washington, it was inspiration followed by motivation, followed by perspiration improves any life. Now it's envy, greed, and entitlement, the unholy trinity of the left, and it's destroying us.
It's equity. It's the idea of equity, right? That's exactly what you just.
Diversity, inclusion, and equity. Those 3 letters spell die.
Yeah. So how did we get here? Because it seems to me as if we got here pretty quickly. Like, and I think that, the Barack Obama presidency just put a brick and tied it to the accelerator, and just pushed it down. And we've been going at rocket speed, it seems to me, ever since then.
Well,
how did we get here? When did it start?
Followership. And I say this stuff began in the 60s. When my parents' generation, World War II, greatest generation, all those men, mostly, some women, came home, and they had been deprived of a lot of economic benefits during the war and the Great Depression before it. And so naturally, they wanted to take advantage of the improved economy, started moving to the suburbs, which broke up the kind of nuclear family we had there with parents and grandparents, cousins, nieces, nephews, all living pretty much close together. And then the 60s came along, and we had the hippies and the yippies and the free love people. Turned out not to be so free, came at a great cost. The beginning of the Playboy philosophy, which told men they didn't have to wait till marriage to have sex. They could just have it whenever they wanted. And later, of course, the pill and abortion and all the rest. So all of that started in the 60s and regressed through the 70s, slowed down a little bit in the 80s, but then roared back in the 90s and the 2000s. I think it's, I go back to a guy I never met, but admired tremendously, Bishop Fulton J. Sheen, a great Catholic bishop who has said so many great things. You can they got a webpage for him. You just read this stuff and you say, it makes so much sense. He once said, America is not suffering from intolerance, as some say. America is suffering from tolerance of everything. And he said, America is not so much overrun by the bigoted as we are overrun by the broad-minded. Cole Porter put it best when he wrote a song in the 30s. In olden days, a glimpse of stocking was looked on as something shocking. Now heaven knows anything goes. And that's where we are today. Anything goes. If you say no to anything, then you're a bigot, a racist, and one of many kinds of phobes.
That's true. That's very true. Listen, if anybody has any questions that they want to ask Cal, put it up, type it in. I'll put it up on the screen within reason. and we'll ask Cal. So I guess where we are now, I keep hearing, this is it, where America's hit the tipping point and we're going over. You look at the Durham report that came out, and the left. I was watching, Mika and Joe were going on and on and on about conspiracy theories and people who buy into these conspiracy theories, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you were the biggest pimps of the conspiracy theory of Russia, 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 and here you are, saying that this report's no big deal, and all these people on the right believe in conspiracies. Are like, yes, because people like you tell us about them. I kind of feel like it's unraveled, like it all was behind the scenes, and now it no longer is behind the scenes. And I look at this and I'm like, I'm wondering if this is the end of America as we once knew it. And and I don't feel that old, but I kind of do feel like
You don't look it
tipping
either.
point. Oh, thank you. But I do kind of feel like the tipping point is here. Do you view it that way?
Well, we've had many potential tipping points in this
Right.
country. 1776, it was doubtful whether we were going to win the revolution. I did not cover that, by the way. Then we had the Civil War, of course. Vietnam was a major divider. People thought the country was coming apart. The Civil Rights Movement, the assassination of both Kennedys and Martin Luther King Jr., riots in the streets,
True.
the Chicago Convention, Democratic Convention in 1968. Terrible things, but we've always managed to survive. But the reason we've survived is because this remnant has been left over that has grown again. In winter, in states where there's winter, the trees shed their leaves, but they come back again in the spring. I'm not sure we have that remnant left now. We don't have much of a memory of the way things were when they were more, you should pardon the expression, normal. We can't even define normal today. And if you try to define normal, you're going to offend some group that will rain down all kinds of horrible things on you. Look at this business about transgender men and women's sports. You had this woman, what was her name? Riley, I think, who got
Riley Gaines.
that dumped on out in San Francisco, physically threatened, simply for saying that women's sports ought to be for biological women. It's unfair for men who think they're women and who have a stronger muscle structure to participate in women's sports. She's right. I mean, how could you argue against something so logical? But people see this and they cower and they're afraid to speak truth and stand up against the bullies. And that is something also different. You look at this Marine who courageously stepped in to protect women on the New York subway. And now he's the bad guy, according to Alvin Bragg, the miserable district attorney. And the guy with a rap sheet longer than both of my arms is the victim. It's just amazing. If you don't stand up for truth, then you're going to fall for anything. And that's where we are. I'm not sure we're going to survive. I mean, there's nothing in prophecy or history that will guarantee the survival of the United States. I just know that if we continue down the path that we're on, economically, morally, and every other category, there's no guarantee that we will, at least not the kind of nation that we inherited. Look at the British Empire. I mean, it once said that the sun never set on the British Empire.
Empire, right.
It sets all the time.
Well, life is cyclical. You go back to, a time to reap, a time to sow. You go back to all of that, and you look at this. Everything has a season, right? Yeah. And so maybe
that's another verse from Ecclesiastes made popular by the rock group The Byrds.
Yes, exactly. Well, see, I know it from the Byrds because I'm Catholic, so we don't memorize the Bible.
I want to go back to something you said earlier about the Durham report. You go back and look at the editorials of the New York Times, the Washington Post, the way this was reported by the major media. You remember the syrupy movie Love Story with that awful line, love means never having to say you're sorry. Well, if you're a liberal and a Democrat, you never have to admit that you're wrong. And you look at some of these people now, they're saying, well, this was terrible. We spent all this money on something. Where were they when Hillary Clinton was paying for the Steele dossier and promoting all of this stuff? Where were they when Robert Mueller said, yes, Hillary did violate the law when all of those secret emails, information in the emails were sent, but she didn't intend to, so we're not going to prosecute her. I'm telling you, it's just the most amazing thing. I think one of the reasons is that everybody's got something on somebody else in Washington. So if you indict me, I'm going to release what I know about you. So nobody says anything about anybody. And it's disgusting. Another reason
When
we need term limits.
so I guess my question is I keep hearing from everybody that the party's flipped in the 60s, and the Democrats went from being the party of the KKK to being the party for for freedom, and it's the Republicans now who are the racists. I keep
Yeah.
hearing that. Then they tell me that things flipped again, right? And that well, no, they didn't flip it, but they're the party now, because what I look at is, you talked about the 60s, how this started. Bernie Sanders was a hippie in the 60s, right?
Yeah.
Right?
He
And
moved
now
to the
he's the
Soviet
man.
Union. Yeah.
Right now he's the man. He's the guy who we were saying never trust anybody over 30. Don't trust the man. And he went to communist Russia on his honeymoon. And he's railing only now about billionaires, because now Bernie's a millionaire. So he doesn't rail about the millionaires and the billionaires. Now it's just the billionaires, because he's a millionaire. And so when did that flip happen? When did the hippies from the 60s become authoritarians in the 2000s?
Well, they moved into the universities and the public education system. People always ask me, well, what can we do to turn this around? Other than prayer, I would say we got to get our kids and grandchildren out of these indoctrination centers known as the public schools and the universities that teach critical race theory, transgenderism. Facebook's got 57 differentiations of gender, and then the last one says other in case they miss one. All this stuff, the Chinese look at us and laugh. I mean, they're not teaching all this stuff. They're teaching math and science. They're sending a lot of their students over here to MIT and other great universities, the ones that are left. And then they come back and they work on things to oppose the United States and plot the invasion of Taiwan. Meanwhile, we're into critical race theory and drag queen story hour and transgenderism and same-sex bathrooms and locker rooms and all of that stuff. Whatever happened to the basics: reading, writing, and arithmetic, science?
Right.
You look at the NEP, the National Education Report, or whatever it's called, NEP, I think it is, and you see that the United States continues to lag behind in the basic skills needed to make a life, reading and mathematics especially. Where do you think China is on this? They're up at number one. Other countries are much higher than the United States. We got to turn this around.
Have the Republicans always been feckless and useless? Have they always been cowards?
No. I mean, I've got a column coming Thursday comparing Biden's Howard University speech on Saturday with a speech by another president 99 years ago to the same university full of Black students. His name was Calvin Coolidge, our 30th president. You look at that speech, and I've got excerpts of it in my column on Thursday. It'll be posted on my website tomorrow. It's positive. It's affirming. It's praising what they called then the Negro race for their contributions to America and their overcoming of the past. And it's just amazing. Now, 1924 was the time of the Klan. The Klan, of course, was initiated by a Democrat, Nathan Bedford Forrest. Many Democrats were members of it. You think of Robert Byrd, who was a grand cyclops or Clecon or whatever he was. And
Kleagle. He was a grand Kleagle.
Yeah. And Joe Biden praised him. He said he was a mentor and a role model for him. So, but they once asked Nixon, how do you want to be remembered by history? And he said, it depends on who writes it. And that's very true. You look at Arthur Schlesinger Jr. and others, Henry Steele Commager of Amherst, and how they write history and how they denigrated Calvin Coolidge and other Republicans. This is why we should not get all of our news from a single source. Democracy, a constitutional republic, not the natural state of humanity. You have to work at it. Just like you can't get in shape by watching an exercise video, you cannot maintain a constitutional republic without active engagement day to day, not just at election time.
Yeah. So, and this is going long, but I love talking to you, and I could pick your brain forever, but I will let you go. I promise. Joe Biden the president right now. Are we naive? Are people crazy? Is it a conspiracy theory to think that he's not running the show? Or have we hit a point in our country where a Manchurian candidate actually could be a reality?
I love that movie, the original, not the remake.
Yeah, I don't want to live through it though.
No. I think it's obvious when you look at him and you listen to him that he is a man in decline. You do not have to be a doctor to see this. The old line, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. The man cannot put coherent sentences together. He forgets where he is sometimes. When he was asked by a child recently about the last country he visited, it was only Ireland, I think 10 days before, he couldn't remember.
Right.
These are all signs. You have a former White House physician who worked under Obama as well, saying that he is displaying early signs of dementia. That's not a cruel thing to say if it is a fact, any more than putting a warning label on cigarettes is cruel to say to cigarette smokers. This is bad for your health. So, yes, I think it's a lot like those child kings in the Middle Ages who had adults behind the throne and pushed the kid out there just as a symbol. I think, Susan Rice, who just left the White House, but a lot of others, Obama holdovers, and maybe Obama himself. Who knows? You never hear from him anymore, do you?
Yeah.
He and his people are really running the country, and I would say ruining it as well.
Well, Obama always waxed poetic about having a third term.
Yeah, well, there you go.
And isn't he, I believe, and you'll know, he's the first president to not move out of Washington, D.C. after his presidency, to not like leave the area. He's the first one to, hunker down in Washington, D.C. and build a big wall around his place, which I thought was ironic.
No wall on the border, but a wall around his place. Yeah,
exactly.
That's true. And that ought to tell you something. I mean, I thought he was an Illinoisan. I mean, he represented Illinois in the United States Senate, but it's hard to get people to leave that town. I remember I told this story often, and I don't think he minded me telling it because it's very funny, but it's also a great lesson. George McGovern, the senator from South Carolina, Democratic presidential nominee in 1972, was a friend of mine. And we would go out and have civil debates together, have a meal together. And I'm not sure you could do that today. If you're running for office, somebody take a picture and use it as a campaign ad against you. But when he lost in the Reagan landslide in 1980, he decided to do something different other than public service. He went up to Connecticut and bought an inn and tried to run it. Well, after a couple of years, it went bankrupt. And a Wall Street Journal reporter called him up, wanted to know what happened. And then the only thing you need to know about what happens to politicians who stay too long in Washington, George McGovern said, gee, if I knew how difficult it was to run a business, I might have voted differently in the Senate. Says it all. Patrick Leahy, before he left, said, I've been in Washington 40 years. He thought that was a compliment. I don't think so. That's the problem. You get out of touch. You don't really spend your own money. You never run a business. You've never done a balance sheet. You don't know anything about anything other than government and spending other people's money.
Yep. So we have a question for you. Louis V here says, hello, Cal. Nice to meet you. I hear you on WMAL radio in O'Connor and Company show. Who do you think will win the Republican nomination, and who do you want the Republican nominee to be?
Well, I'm not a prophet or the son of one. And so May of 2023 will probably look a lot different than May of 2024. So as of right now, obviously, Donald Trump is the leader by far toward the Republican nomination in next year. But I just don't think, just from a pragmatic standpoint, whatever you think about whether you think the election was stolen or he's legitimate president, whatever you think, you've got to have a sizable number of independents, which is now the largest growing political group in the country. And all the polls show that a large number of independents have left him. Those who had voted for him before are not going to vote for him again. And it's the same with some Republicans, I would say. Now, I live in Florida now, and I've watched from a distance, because I haven't been able to get an interview with him yet, Ron DeSantis, who is, I would call Trump without some of the baggage. And I think he is. I think he's the future. I mean, we got to have younger leadership, in my view. I mean, Biden and I are about the same age. He's 1 month older, but I hope I don't
Are
displace.
you kidding?
Well,
Wait,
no.
wait. Hold on.
Yeah.
You guys are about the same age. Get the hell out of here.
I know. I've been living a cleaner life, so I look better. Yeah, I just turned 80 last December. I just got my first hate mail about age. Somebody called me a silly old man, which, I guess if he's writing me, he's not writing ransom notes. But anyway.
I'm sorry. I did not mean to interrupt you. You're talking about Ron DeSantis, but I am floored that you guys are about the same age. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
Don't you younger women who are watching this, you can continue to write me. It'll be okay. I'll give you advice. So I like him a lot. I think there are a lot of other good people out there. Tim Scott, South Carolina senator, is looking at it. Christy Noem is a bright light. We've got a lot of younger leadership. You remember, you don't remember, you were too young, but Jack Kennedy said in his 1961 inaugural speech, the torch has been passed to a new generation.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is good to refresh the political system with new and younger people who are demonstrating that they've done a great job. DeSantis won by 20 points, which is unheard of in Florida or a lot of other places. He's extremely popular. He stood up to this wokeism. His favorite line is Florida, where woke has gone to die. It's a good line. I think he needs to move beyond that now. You got Bob Iger of Disney who's standing up against him. And so I think he needs to move on to the economic and some of the foreign policy issues. I was just in Israel a few weeks ago, and after I came out of a meeting with my longtime friend, Bibi Netanyahu, there's DeSantis sitting on the couch waiting to go in. And I said, listen, I've been trying to get an interview with you for months. What's the problem? Well, we have a lot of requests. I said, don't give me that. I said, come on, I'm not your novice columnist. I've been around a while. So his deputy chief of staff gives me a card and says, I'll communicate this to the communications department. Almost 3 weeks have gone by. I haven't heard a word. So I wrote him again. I said, come on, this is rude. At least respond to me. Nothing. I think he needs to do a better job with connecting with people, which was a point that New Yorker magazine did in a profile of him a few months ago.
Very quickly, I have another question for you. People are asking questions, Cal. How were the columns you wrote with Bob Beckel in USA Today formulated? Did you write them together at the same time in collaboration? That's a great question.
Yeah, we would alternate on who started off. We'd agree on the subject and we'd run it by our editor first. And if he said it was okay, then if it was his turn to start, he would start and I would respond. We wouldn't do it on the phone because, we were both moving around doing different things, but we'd send an email back and forth. And it was around 700 words or something. We wrote it for 10 years. When we first started, letters to the editor started coming in and said, are these guys kidding? Are they serious about this? And then when they found out that we started getting mail, this is wonderful that two people on opposite sides of the political spectrum could be friends, could respect each other, and even learn from each other, and on occasion agree with the other person's opinion. Now, you don't have that unless you build a personal relationship. Right. I said earlier that we are all now parts of tribes, and we don't talk to each other. We know each other by labels. We're Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, gay and straight, and black and white, and all of these other, and we're identified by those labels. Yeah. But that's not who we are. One of Obama's better lines, I wish he had practiced it more, but it was a great line. We're not a black or white America. We're the United States of America. That's the kind of thing that I think appeals to most people. But you've got all these groups now. Whatever happened to individuals? We're all parts of groups, and we're identified by the group that we belong to. I don't want to be identified by any group. I am who I am.
Well, you are in a group of a very small, select few people, this is why listening to these stories is why I absolutely adore talking to Cal. Because I was in Israel and I was talking to Bibi Netanyahu, and I come out of the room and there's Ron DeSantis, and he doesn't. You don't say it with like you're throwing the names around. This is
they're just
your
people.
life. It's just your life, and it's so cool. I love it.
Oh, thanks. Well, they're friends. I mean, you know, this is what you get, as you know, from your working in Washington. You get to meet and know other people
You
beyond
do.
just the label or the stereotype or the image that you may have seen or read about. And you know, I remember a woman came up to me once and said, "Oh, I know who you are." I said, "No, ma'am. You know what I do. Knowing who I am will take a longer relationship." Walk into a restaurant. Do you have a reservation? Yes, but I'm thinking of eating here anyway. But
Oh, dad jokes. Those are dad jokes, Cal. Come on. So, Cal, I have one question for you, and then I'll let you go because this has just been so enjoyable for me, and I really
me
thank you
too,
for this.
Mary.
Um, who's the most interesting person you've ever met?
Other than Jesus of Nazareth, I'm going to surprise you. You probably think I'm going to say a president, a
Me?
prime minister, or you. Well, you are interesting, no question about it. I would say Julie Andrews, who I had on my old Fox show after stalking her for 40 years. She finally gave in. She single-handedly made me fall in love with Broadway musicals with her 3-octave range voice.
Oh.
And I told her I still remember the piccolo part and I could have danced all night. She's just a warm
Oh.
and wonderful and lovely person. And I had tea with her in New York, and then she came and did my show. And you can still find it on YouTube if you search for my name and Julie Andrews. You will see the biggest suck up interview you've ever seen in your life.
I'm sure it was wonderful. All right, the book is a Watchman in the Night. There it is. There it is. And the cover is on a smiling picture of Cal on the promo for this show. Cal, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. You've just been amazing and wonderful.
Well,
And
thanks, Mary. And
I
regards to your fortunate hubby.
Oh, I was just going to say, give that wife of yours a big hug for me. And I miss getting to talk to you every week. I really do.
Oh, you need to come down to Florida. You'll enjoy it.
So, a little secret, I was in Florida in April, but on the other side of the state. So, I wasn't anywhere near you.
Well, I'll forgive you for that. But next time you come on down, we'll treat you right, put you up, take you to my wife's restaurant, feed you well, and you'll enjoy it.
That's what I said to my husband. I said, you know what? I'm not a Florida girl at all. Like, I didn't think I'd like Florida at all. And we were in Naples, and I was like, you know what? I could kind of get used to this. Of course, it was somebody else's house in
Yeah.
their really ritzy community that they're paying the dues for. I was just like, oh, I was like, if you guys need like somebody to watch the house while you're gone, I
Yeah.
could do this.
Well, come on down, as they say on The Price is Right.
Oh, well, thank you so much, my friend. I love you. Thank you so much for your
Hey, Mary.
time. And you have a fantastic, amazing, a wonderful week. And again, like I said, give that lovely wife of yours a big hug. Go out and get it. A Watchman in the Night by Cal Thomas. Have a great night. Bye.
Thanks.